So I started visiting this website and looking at all the pictures of these children and just felt God just tugging at my heart. And I shared with Paul, I think, I was really scared, but I think God might be, telling me that we're supposed to adopt again, adopt a child with special needs. And you remember your response?
I don't, but it was...
I remember because I thought it was so funny. He didn't say you're out of your mind or anything like that. He said, oh, I'll bet he is telling you that, but he's not telling me yet.
Yeah, I wasn't there. I wasn't on board at all. Well, we're the Olsens. I'm Paul Olsen, and this is my wife Lisa. And behind me to the right is Noah, and he's 11 years old. And Eli's right behind me, and he's 9. And this is Eliana, and she's 3. And this is our new addition, this is Isabella, and she's 5.
It started a long time ago, 2006, when I was thinking back to when we first started kind of talking about it. We had a lot of friends who adopted, so it was part of our community. And I started thinking about it, we started talking about it, and then I can remember the day Paul emailed me a picture of a little girl from China. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
It was out of the blue. She had special needs and was like, hey, maybe we should adopt. And we'd been talking about it, but that was kind of like the turning point, like, oh goodness, let's get things moving, let's look into this, and get going with it. We actually started the paperwork in the spring of 2007, mm-hmm. and we started in China and switched to Vietnam, which turned out to not be a very good decision. But took us about 6 months to build our paperwork, our dossier, and we had planned to adopt a little girl under 2. Mm-hmm. I remember looking at the special needs checklist. They give you a checklist about the things that you're willing to consider or not consider, which is a very strange thing. When you just see things on a piece of paper, of course, they're a lot scarier when, they're just there by themselves and they're not associated with a person. I remember saying, well, maybe this, but not that. So we were willing to accept some, minor special needs at the time. Our dossier was logged in Vietnam in December of 2007. And then in March of 2008, the Memorandum of Agreement between the United States and Vietnam for international adoptions expired. They fully expected it to be re-signed, and it was not re-signed. We remained pretty optimistic and hopeful because we thought God told us to do this. We felt pretty strongly that it was going to work out because, of course, if God asks you to do it, he's going to open all the doors and there'll be no obstacles, right? Our naivete at the time. Yeah. But time went on. They weren't even meeting to discuss the problem, and then we thought, wow, maybe this isn't going to happen after all. And then actually that fall of 2008, I got pregnant. And I remember Eli was really little. He was like, what would he have been? 3? And he said, oh, God's not bringing us a baby from Vietnam. He's just going to put one in your tummy instead. And we thought, well, this is God. He closed that door, and, he's going to give us a child another way. And then January of 2009, we lost that baby. And then it really looked like the adoption was not going to go through. And that was just a really, really hard time.
Yeah. It was devastating.
It was devastating.
The paperwork, the time, the prayer, you put your soul into it, and then it just doesn't happen because of some political issues, and it was really hard.
It was hard, especially, like I said, we thought, God told us to do this, and we were obedient, yet we're not bringing a child home. And then the pregnancy, and then that not being fulfilled either. And I just remember that was really a time where I pulled back from God and thought, wow, I don't know if I want to put myself out there again. So it was really a stretching time, a faith-building time, a time of maturing as a Christian.
we were just confused, I think, devastated. You know, it was a financial hit, and it was exhausting. I mean, just the two processes were exhausting, and we kind of didn't know what was going on.
Well, and it was interesting because we did receive quite a bit of counsel from godly people who said, you know, maybe, you know, God's closing these doors. Maybe your family, you know, is where it needs to be. 2 kids, and you need to come to grips with that. And, you know, maybe that's what this is. And more than one person told us that. And it was kind of hard to hear. I think Paul accepted that more readily than I did. I was like, okay, let's move
on.
Let's move forward.
Yeah. It was after all that, it was kind of easy for me to step away and feel like that was the path. Then it's just the 2 boys, and we're going to go from there.
But my heart still was just so broken for. I mean, after that, I struggled with some stress and anxiety, and I just felt so broken, and still had such a desire in my heart for more children through adoption or having another biological child, but feeling like that wasn't going to happen. It wasn't supposed to happen. How to come to terms with that. I remember, you know, for more than a year, actually praying that God would take the desire away if it wasn't what, you know, He had for our family. You know, please just take that desire away. I don't want it if it's not what you want, but, you know, you still feel what you feel. Yeah. So that seemed like a long, 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, it's kind of a haze. Out of the blue, had a dream of us having an older girl, about 5 or so, dark hair. She was in a white dress. Just that was kind of a glimpse, and that was it. And I told Lisa about it, but we, you know, didn't go anywhere from there. You know, I didn't have any more dreams, but it just was something that happened and made me think of the adoption process again. But you know, we didn't pursue it at all.
So we were just kind of, you know, in a holding pattern for a while, and I still really wanted more children. And then, yeah, God blessed us with Eliana. I guess that was 2010 that I was pregnant. She was born in January of 2011. And then she came with a surprise diagnosis of Down syndrome that we got the day after that she was born, which was an interesting time as well, not knowing much about that. It was kind of, you know, a little bit scary at first, but actually this is kind of neat. Paul had another dream.
Yeah, it seemed like sometime during the summer, I don't remember, I just kind of, God showed me that we were going to have a child with Down syndrome. And it, you know, it was a dream that I thought, well, you know, I was having all sorts of dreams, and I didn't really think much about it until actually she was born and I saw her, and then it started clicking, and I was piecing that together, and then they told us. And I hadn't said anything to Lisa up until that point, till after the doctor came in and the day after and told us. But I had a suspicion after seeing her, and I didn't want to say anything to Lisa, but then I told her a couple days afterwards, I think.
Well, after the doctor shared it with us, he shared his dream, and actually that...
And so it made it a lot easier for me. I had a lot of peace about it, where it is a big deal. I mean, you think of your life plans and goals, and kind of throws that all out of whack. And it was still scary because we just didn't know too much about it. But I had more of a peace about it, and I think God was just preparing me for that. And then he had to work on Lisa a little bit.
Well, after he shared his dream, though, I had a lot more peace as well. Like, God knew this was going to happen, and He's got it, and this is what He has for our family. And that does factor into our adoption story, too.
Yeah, we'll get to that. And so it made us refocus and kind of see life as more of a day-to-day. And that was a good thing, I think, for both of us.
It was a huge blessing.
Rather
than
we're
trained to look so far ahead, and it's biblical that we're not supposed to worry about the future, and you know, take things as they come. And anyway, Eliana just was a huge unexpected blessing. I mean, I've heard people say, you know, Down syndrome is one of those things that I never knew that I needed or wanted in my life, which sounds kind of funny, but people who have experienced it, I mean, she's just changed our perspective about so many things, and she really she is just such a blessing. I mean, she's the easiest out of the three, the 4 kids now, but the 3 kids, I mean, she really just had a positive impact on our whole family, on our boys, on our extended family, and it's hard to explain. But because of that, I also kind of was thrust into the world of special needs after she was born, trying to read things and connect with other families, online through blogs and Facebook and lots of things like that. And I kind of got tuned into a community that was focused on special needs adoption and orphans with special needs around the world. And once I started reading, it really started to tug at my heart, thinking, wow, this could be Eliana if she had been born somewhere else. She could be facing life in a terrible institution. Being an orphan is hard anywhere, but being an orphan with special needs in certain parts of the world is almost like a death sentence. So I just started reading, and God started tugging at my heart. But when the last adoption failed, I remember Paul even saying, "No way, we are done. We are never adopting."
I was to that point.
And you don't tell God, "I'm never going to do this," because it doesn't work out.
I think I turned it more into he'd have to hit me over the head with a shovel.
Which
so I could,
he did.
Yeah, that ended up happening.
So by fall of, 2011, I really was, immersed, and I found a ministry called Reese's Rainbow Adoption Ministry, and they advocate for orphans with special needs, with Down syndrome and other special needs, and they try to match them with families. They're not an agency, but they have photo listings, and they really try to get publicity, for waiting children around the world and try to match them with families and do fundraising for them. So children have money sometimes available that people can donate towards their adoption to try to, as enticement, because adopting children with special needs isn't any less expensive or any less arduous than adopting, typical children. So I started visiting this website and looking at all the pictures of these children, and just felt God just tugging at my heart. And I shared with Paul, I think, I was really scared, but I think God might be, telling me that we're supposed to adopt again, adopt a child with special needs. And you remember your response?
I don't, but it was...
I remember, because I thought it was so funny. He didn't say you're out of your mind or anything like that. He said, "Oh, I'll bet he is telling you that, but he's not telling me yet."
Yeah, I wasn't there. I wasn't on board at all. And for me, honestly, it was a big money thing too. We lost so much money in the Vietnam thing that I was like, I don't know if I want to try this again. It's expensive, and a very selfish approach that I took. And I think we decided to inquire about 2 little girls, and they both were from Peru, for whatever reason. And
well, this was interesting, because
sorry.
he had sent me a picture of Isabella. And I looked at it and I thought, oh my goodness, he's, God's telling him that it's time to do this, but I thought she's too old. So still I was putting my limits on she's too old, she's 5, I don't know, we need to be younger, more like Eliana. But, I was very encouraged, and we kind of waited, and we got to a point where we thought, we really need to know if we need to dive in or if we just need to kind of hover and wait. Because when you're picking a specific child, it's hard. Do you always know? Do both of us know that's the one? Or, and I remember one night us looking through every single child on Reese's Rainbow and praying about it and trying to be open to any country, even countries we didn't want to go to. God, if you want us to go there, you have to make it abundantly clear. And please just, fling a door open. If we're supposed to do this now, make it so obvious. Just open the door. And I remember all night just praying, because I just was so burdened with this. And the next morning, we talked, and we still came back to these 2 little girls from Peru. And one was Ellie's age, and one was Isabella, who was older. And I called the agency and to inquire about them. And it was so interesting, because Isabella was going to be getting a huge grant over the weekend, like the next day. And when she told me the amount of the grant, it was almost exactly to the dollar what we had lost in our Vietnam adoption. Thinking back to all the limits we had the first time around, well, we want to go to a country that's not, that's predictable. We don't want anything unpredictable. We want something safe. We want something, that we don't have to stay there for a month. All these limits. We'll take these special needs and this age, and looking back, it's just ridiculous now. And here we are the second time around. We don't know anything about the country, which turns out to be very difficult for Americans to adopt from. You have to stay there for 3 to 5 weeks. We had no idea about that. How are we going to do that with our kids and work? All these things that we just said, God, if you want it, if this is what you want, we're going to do it. And our special needs checklist, since we had a specific child in mind who had spotty medical records, we pretty much had to say we were okay to everything.
Yeah. So
I mean, we had to
complete
check everything in the list. So it's just kind of funny when you think, God, I'll do whatever you want, we'll adopt if you do it this way.
Yeah.
And the second time around, God was like, this is my way. You really have to trust me and be open to doing things my way.
Yeah, we really went into it letting him be in control. And it was a little hard at first to do that, to be that open, especially with thinking of disabilities and the future of the child. But it really made it more of a peaceful process for me, knowing that, he's in charge. However long it takes or however much it costs, he's got it covered. And it was that was a great blessing for me to go into it knowing that. So.
And it did take a long time. It was 2 years from the start of our paperwork to when we traveled. And for children with special needs, usually it doesn't cost any less, but the time frame is usually shorter to travel. In Ukraine, it could even be 3 to 4 months, or China maybe 6 months. It varies, of course, but 2 years was a very long time for to adopt an orphan with special needs internationally. I kind of think that God was, again, just, refining us through the process of I'm in control. You don't know what to expect. Let me, be in the driver's seat.
Yeah, our plans and expectations are out the window. God's in control. And that made it a lot easier for me again. It really did. I could put all my faith in him and realized we'll go when we go, and we'll get there, and it'll take as long as it needs to. And I don't think Lisa...
I had a little harder time.
She had a little harder time with that, and it really made it easier for me because I knew it was his plan, this whole thing. Because it really, when we look back, it was so crazy for us to do this that it had to be a God thing. So
there's all this prep and anxiety and all this about meeting her, and we're here and it's finally happening, and we got to the orphanage, and it's in this dusty, it looks like a ghost town in northern Peru. I mean, no people anywhere, just like mangy dogs. Everything is walled. It was kind of surreal. It really looked like a ghost town. And we pull up to where the nuns have the orphanage, and there's this big wall outside with a little sliding thing.
A metal door.
Like a speakeasy, back in the day where they lift out the little thing and then they knock on the door, and we're standing there, and they open the little thing, and it's really low because the nuns are very short. and they let us in, and we're waiting. And then you want to tell them about when she came out?
Oh, yeah. We were in this room, and they finally let her out, and out comes this little girl with dark hair and a white dress, and I was just floored. I couldn't believe it. It's I was shell-shocked a little bit. Seeing her, she ran over and gave me a big hug, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful moment. So, honestly, when we were in a hotel room for 3 weeks in Chiclayo, Peru, and another thing we had anticipated, I guess, had planned, at least I had, we thought, well, we didn't have any information, but she was in an orphanage with Catholic nuns. I thought, if nothing else, there would be discipline and structure, and nothing. She couldn't communicate. Her only way to communicate was to scream and kick and grab. And I think that was her survival mode. They took care of her. They loved her, but
they let her do
whatever she wanted to. So she was wild. And that really threw us. I mean, from the get-go, we were again shell-shocked from that. And
kind of scared. I mean,
Yeah.
more than once she ran off from us and we had to chase her,
Yeah.
like in a park. Waiting for appointments was a nightmare
Oh.
because she would kick and hit and scream and want to get down, and then she'd want to run away from us, and she'd be laughing the whole time. It was kind of scary.
Yeah.
We thought, is this going to be life, forever? So again, the little pictures, a little reassurance as
And-
we needed them.
and she's nonverbal, so she didn't speak Spanish or English, and I don't think they ever tried to teach her that. So again, the only thing she could do is grab and do physical things. And so that made it even harder for us, and the communication barrier for us to tell her no or do things like that
She didn't.
was even harder.
She hadn't been exposed to anything. She didn't
Yeah.
know
Didn't know
how
how to
to look
play.
at books or how to play with a doll or anything. We brought a doll to her in the orphanage, and she threw it.
Yeah.
That was what you do with a doll. You grab it by its hair and you chuck it across the room. And she thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Books, nothing. You flap it open and closed. We just think she had nothing. She was just,
And they wouldn't let us see her living conditions either. So,
just a waiting room.
we were kind of thinking she might have just spent a lot of time in a crib with nothing. And so we had to
Yeah.
kind of reevaluate how we were going to
We're expecting
work with her.
Eliana.
Yeah.
Another Eliana.
And
who's-
Eliana is...
She's a princess.
she's my little princess.
She's, she loves to look at books, and she's quiet, and she's very relational
Yeah.
and communicative. Even though she's not verbal, she's very communicative. So it was a little bit of a shock at first, thinking, wow, these are polar opposites. How are we going to do this?
Yeah.
Why do you think there is such a difference between Eliana and Isabella? Well, let's talk about the reasons behind that. I mean,
Loving family from the beginning. I mean, I think if we could have had her when she was born, I don't think we would have seen any of that. Because she is a very sweet little girl. It's just that was her life. And so now we're trying to, have her adapt to having a family and with the rules and some structure and,
She's getting a little more affectionate,
yeah.
and she's come so far.
Oh, yeah,
but
she
she
really
has her
has.
moments where she reverts. Like new situations are very hard for her. Starting preschool this week,
Yeah.
she's had a hard time, keeping it together at preschool, which I didn't really anticipate. When Ellie went to preschool, she cried because she had some attachment issues. Isabella hits her teacher when she tells her not to do something.
Yeah.
I mean, it hasn't been terrible, and it's not off the charts of what the teachers have experienced, but it's still outside
We
of
didn't
our realm
expect
of
that.
experience. We didn't expect it, but she, in new situations, she can't really be trusted,
Yeah.
which is kind of hard.
which is hard for babysitting, things like that, for us to get away because the boys can handle it to a point, but even then,
Yeah.
she'll try to take advantage of whoever's watching her if it's not us. And if, so it makes it even a little more exhausting. But remember, this is his deal. He's going to make it work.
And he's
We-
going to change us through it.
Yes.
When we,
Yeah, he certainly has.
Yeah, when we're going through the frustrating times, the same things bother me over and over again, and I keep thinking, why does she keep doing that? And I'm like, no, God might want to change me through this, and I'm not always a willing
Yeah.
participant. So
It's really taught me how to live day to day rather than trying to plan too much out into the future with anything. It really has brought me down to that aspect that I think God wants us to live day to day life and trust in Him with everything and not worry about, what are we going to do when they get to high school or beyond. It's God's got it. He's got control. So.
Well, and even redefining, having Eliana and now Isabella too, redefining our ideas of what a successful life is.
Yep.
Even for Christians, American Christians, we're on a path to retirement and all these things, and we look at things a little differently now. We have to look at success differently. Isabella and Eliana, they're not going to be the valedictorian of their class and go and get a PhD and that's okay, but when we started, you want your kids to do well in school and go to college and do this and this to be a successful person. But, we've had to we look at that and there's success and purpose for everyone, that's ordained by God, and He'll give them exactly what they need and the experiences they need to fulfill, what He has planned for them. It's one of the best things that came from Eliana, God giving us Eliana, is that we just, there's so much stuff that we get so stressed about that just is, it's not important, in the grand scheme. I mean, you kind of look at things like with an eternal perspective instead of the,
Daily
American
grind of,
plan
yeah.
of the daily grind. And it's been freeing, for a family and for the boys. It's taken some of the pressure off of the boys too. And
Well, they've really matured through the process
Mhm.
too, and just the way they relate to other people and the way they see their sisters and how they've stepped up and said, hey, they'll take care of them when they get older. And that's just a really neat thing to see.
yeah, they're challenging a lot of things we'll hear is, well, aren't you worried about your kids? You don't want to burden your kids, Well, you know what? It shouldn't be a burden to think about taking care of your family. Really, where did we get so off track, where it's bad that we, I don't know. So yes, it's kind of radical, but it's been really, really good.
Yeah.
And the boys just have such a different perspective from the get-go, than we did when we were kids. That it's a great blessing. Yeah.
And I think it's opened their eyes to adoption and kids in need, all over the world. It's a whole new community we're involved with, and it's really neat for them to see and care for, and play with all these other kids, even at church, that are from all over the world. It's just an awesome thing to see.
And kids with special needs too.
Yeah.
They're not going to be ones who are going to be afraid to go up to somebody who's a little different. They might be even drawn to them,
Yeah.
which is awesome, So